Hi everyone, and welcome to our latest virtual winemaker interview. We're very excited about today's guests because not only do they make just terrific wines, but they are beautiful people inside and out. We had an opportunity to meet with them before COVID, and we just think it's necessary for you guys to know about their wines and know about them.
And they are Scott and Marta Rich of Talisman Wines in Sonoma County. Talisman produce a range of different Pinot Noirs, all from Sonoma, although I think they're going to quibble. They have one that's in Carneros, and whether or not it's on the Sonoma or the Napa side is depends on how you draw the map. But each one of these are fantastic Pinot Noirs. They very recently introduced a rosé. We've not tried it, and of course it's a rosé of Pinot Noir. Talisman wines, definitely something for you all to check out. Cheers!
Cheers!
Here's to you with an amazing glass of your 2010 Pinot from the Weir Vineyard. And I don't know if you recall when we were up with you on, I think it was Wildcat Mountain, I was telling you that Weir is usually my favorite of all of your wines. Anyhow, I'm just totally digging the 2010 Weir right now. This is wowzers.
Wowzers. And it's 11 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It has so much structure left. We both said that has tons of time on it. Are you also drinking the 2010?
Yes. We are.
Is it tasting as good for you as it is for us?
Yeah, it's pretty tasty. It's really soft and expressive, and yeah, I like it quite a bit.
Well, Weir Vineyard Pinots have a big following, and it's often our customers' favorite vineyard. It's an amazing vineyard, and it makes these wines that have grace and depth and minerality and red fruit and rose petals. And I tell people that when I'm drinking the Weir, I feel like I'm laying on a red velvet couch and somebody's rubbing my feet and sprinkling rose petals.
I like where you're going with this. Does that actually happen, or do you have to tell Scott to do it? You have some new vineyards that you're working with since we've seen. I think one of them was Sadie's, Dawson, and Starscape. Those three. I don't think we've tried any of those.
Yeah, we're always looking for new interesting things, and we started with the Dawson Vineyard because it was farmed by one of our vineyard managers that farms a couple of other vineyards as well, and he planted this vineyard for these folks, and it's actually very, very close to the winery. It's closer than any of the other vineyards, and it's about a mile and a half, maybe 2 miles just to the east. And it's in Carneros, and it's got very heavy soils. And we knew that it would never be a stellar, top 3% vineyard or anything like that. But it's organically farmed and mostly biodynamic. And because the soils aren't absolutely perfect, what they've done is they're cropping it a little bit more heavily than we do for our very best, highest quality vineyards. And then they're able to charge us a little bit less for the grapes. And that has become our dedicated vineyard for two things. One, it now takes up a substantial percentage of our cuvee. And it also provides us with a very, very reliable source of some absolutely stellar rosé. So we're doing a North Coast rosé still, which has wine from all of our vineyards in it, but we're also doing the single vineyard rosé, and it's it's not a vineyard that's going to make stellar, mind-blowing red wine, but it makes stellar, mind-blowing pink wine.
Yeah.
So we're really happy about that.
Great.
And then the next vineyard was Sadie's, and Sadie's is due west of Sebastopol. It's in one of my very, very favorite Pinot growing areas, and it is classic Russian River Goldridge soils, and we've got two clones there. We've got Dijon 115, and we've got Pommard there as well. Yields are very moderate, and it makes some really, really nice, friendly, forward, happy wines.
And it's only 3.5 acres.
Yeah.
And it's named for a dog, a big, beautiful German Shepherd. And it was planted in 2009, so it's our youngest vineyard. But the wines are spunky and fun and flavorful.
And then the Starscape Vineyard, the story there's a little bit more complicated, and a lot of really, really weird connections. So one of my very best friends, Guy was the best man in our wedding many years after what I'm about to tell you about. But he was a winemaker before I became a winemaker. And one of his very first jobs as a winemaker was at a place called, thank you, Mark West. Mark West Vineyards. And Mark West Vineyards was owned by a guy who was a pilot for United Airlines and his wife, Joan. And my friend Norm was making wine there, and I didn't have anything to do one weekend. And so I called him up and said, hey, can I come help you? And it turned out to be my first exposure to any sort of production things inside a real winery. I came on a Saturday and I spent the entire day doing absolutely nothing but filling barrels with Chardonnay juice to ferment. Oh. And but that was sort of my beginning. And in the meantime, Norm left and went to some other places. He's now got a winery down in the Central Coast called Flying Goat. And it turns out that I was the general manager and winemaker at Carneros Creek for exactly a year. And the guy who had purchased, who had become the majority owner of Carneros Creek at the time, had purchased the Mark West Vineyard, only he rechristened it and called it Floodgate, which was named after another vineyard that he had owned previously but had sold, but he kept the name. And so he transferred that name to this new vineyard. And I actually got some grapes from it and made wine while I was at Carneros Creek. And then after my year at Carneros Creek, I left and did some other things. But then this vineyard was sold to somebody else. And these people rechristened it Starscape. And so I am now purchasing grapes from this vineyard that was really my first exposure to real winemaking. And it's located in the middle reach of the Russian River, directly across the street from one of Kistler's vineyards. And it makes really, really prototypical, big, fruit-forward Russian River sorts of Pinots.
But with heft and depth, kind of like Adastra that we work with over on the Napa side of Carneros. Those wines, they're big.
They're big, yeah.
But this one's got a kind of a mix of red and blue fruits, and black fruits. So
we have a 2010 and a 2012 Adastra sitting behind us, and we're doing all we can not to open them up right now, because it's like we always had this thing of I think I said in the email is like, Weir is always the one we think is our favorite, and then we'll have Adastra, and it's like, well, it might be Adastra, and then we have a Wildcat, it might be Wildcat or Red Dog. So,
and maybe now would be a good time, Scott and Marta, just to let our viewers know about all the different vineyards, and how you guys don't have a estate, but you have contracts with, frankly, what are obviously your friends, the various growers, and they show very prominently in the walls of your beautiful tasting room. Maybe you could just give us a little bit of an intro to your guys choosing vineyards.
Well, there are a whole bunch of different factors that go into this, but the most important thing is knowing that we have to work as a team with these folks. We want to like them, and we have to have common goals. We have to have common values.
And we have to be able to have fun dinners together.
Yeah.
That's important. Here. I'll drink to that.
So the personalities of the growers are really important because we approach this as a team effort. It's not like they grow their grapes in isolation and then they say it's time to pick and we get the grapes and make wine. I'm in the vineyard often during every really major operation that happens in the vineyard, whether it's pruning or shoot thinning or fruit thinning or leaf removal or whatever. We talk about all of these operations and we make sort of a group decision about how to proceed. And, you know, every year is a little bit different. So you don't have a, kind of a fixed way of doing these things. You have a concept of how these things should be done. And then the timing and the severity of each one of these little vineyard management actions is a little bit different each year. And so, you know, a really good grower ad libs and dances with nature in the process of growing their grapes. And we're sort of looking for people who are doing that. And then the second part of it is the vineyards have to be sort of standouts in the areas where they are. For example, Carneros, most uniform of any appellation that I can think of, any AVA, its soils are very uniform throughout the entire region. The weather is very similar from place to place. And there are only a handful of really standout vineyards in Carneros, and Adastra happens to be one of them. And it's because of this little accident of geography. It sits in a low spot, and it's got only a couple of feet of soil, and then it's got a hard pan underneath it. And so it makes growing the grapes there sort of like growing a bonsai. The vines are naturally very small because they're sort of nutrient deprived. The soil profile is small. So between the hard pan and that, the availability of water is somewhat limited. And so these vines are sort of optimally stressed. And when I say that, I say it with this sort of the same idea that people, how people respond to stress. When we're super stressed, we tend to crash and not do well. And the same thing happens with vines. If there's just a little bit of pressure on us, like a deadline, or you know, say you were in school and you needed to do really well on a particular exam, and it would make the difference between whether you got an A or a B in the class. There was some pressure there which stressed you, and you performed better because of that. And it's the same thing for the vines. We like enough stress to make them perform better, but not so much that they collapse.
I think it's also important to point out that with each of these different vineyards and growers, that we have specific blocks that we get year after year. So we really get to know those clones or the age of the vines or the personality coming from that side of the slope or whatever, so that we can make the best wine.
Yeah, and some vineyards are big enough that we will get blocks within the vineyard or rows within certain blocks. That's how it works at Starscape. It's rather large vineyard.
I remember when we were at Wildcat and you were pointing out how you chose the rows because there'd be a slope and you didn't want to be in the bottom. And I that was the first time that hearing you say it is one thing, but when you visually see what you're talking about, it was so obvious in some ways, but amazing that they would actually do that. And I think, do they probably do that in Burgundy where you can have like one row will be one winery and the other one, but you don't hear that. Well, I haven't heard it as much in sort of the California. I would think it'd be so much more work for the grower as well, but obviously you have specific wants.
Well, it is more work for the growers, but in a case like Wildcat, it makes an enormous difference. And because they were so willing to cooperate fully with us, that was one of the reasons that we were so enamored with that vineyard. And at Wildcat, their ability and desire to do what we're asking them makes the difference between making a really outstanding wine and sort of a middle of the road wine. If you saw what a difference it was from one end of the road to the other at Wildcat, and for the Pommard in particular, we're getting the wines just from up at the very top of that plateau that you saw. And if you go down further, everything becomes much more lush and bushy and vigorous. And there's a huge difference in the way that the grapes taste in those two spots.
What your end goal is, and them being able to help you reach that end goal of making the best wine possible, they're obviously going to understand what you're trying to achieve too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's a people business.
Yeah.
In
Very
sales,
much.
marketing, and production. It's
And
like
are you-
putting together the best harvest team and picking a mix of male and female and different personalities and people with different experiences, because they're going to be working intensely long days together.
Yeah, and this past harvest, I put together what I think was the best harvest team we'd ever had, and unfortunately, our harvest only lasted 2 weeks because of all of the smoke.
Right.
We only picked 12 tons out of the 65 or so that we had planned on picking. Everything else, we did these little micro fermentations and then did tastings afterwards. And every single vineyard, with the exception of the Weir vineyard, tasted like smoke.
Oh, no.
So good.
We, along with a lot of other wineries in the area, didn't pick most of our grapes. And now that most people are finished pruning, things look normal. But there was a period of time from when the leaves dropped until now, where things looked really strange, because you would drive down Sonoma Valley and you would see vineyards all over the place with no leaves and lots of fruit left on the vines.
Desecrated clusters.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
really? Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it was heartbreaking.
Totally heartbreaking and eerie sounding as well too. And as you know, we were there in 17 just after the fires. We were there in late October, early November.
It was early November. It was like 2 weeks after the worst part of the fires.
Yeah. So, and to me, it looked like something out of a Tim Burton movie. Just the way it was so burned out. But, and not that we want to dwell on fires, but 20 sounds like it might have been more devastating than 17. Is that even possible, or was it in that sort of a league?
In terms of impact on vineyards, yes. In terms of impact on people, it was a little bit different. We were not we weren't evacuated at our house this last round of fires, but everybody on the other side of the road from us was. So we were on edge and ready to go at the drop of a hat for a few weeks there.
Yeah.
And the smoke was, I think, worse than it was in 2020 than it was in 2017. For some reason, weather conditions were different, and we weren't as impacted by the smoke. The other thing about 2017 is that with Pinot Noir, at least, 99% of everything had already been picked before the fires started. So there weren't the same impacts. Napa Valley, in places where they had late picks for Cabernet, so mostly places that were up in the mountains or on the hillsides where their season's a little bit later. Those guys were very, very affected in 2017, and some of them didn't pick any grapes, but it was just enough later in the season that the impacts were a lot smaller.
Right.
Yeah, the timing was particularly bad this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that for you guys as well, I mean, even up here in BC, it is becoming almost an annual thing to have the fires. Is that a big concern? Are there I don't know how you even work around that, or just hope that Mother Nature is on your side, because it does seem to be more frequent in certain areas.
It has become a big concern, and we've had to make all sorts of adjustments for it. Most of the wineries in the complex that we're in have generators, because we're now counting on losing electricity during harvest. We'll be putting in a generator this year, because I anticipate that things are only going to get worse. We've just finished rewriting one of the contracts with one of our growers to accommodate to accommodate smoke taint, because it had never been a big enough deal for us before to really think very hard about it. But now it's become such a big deal that we've had to rewrite contracts to accommodate it and figure out procedures of dealing with it and making decisions that are fair to everybody. So it's the smoke stuff and fires are a big deal now.
Yeah.
Wow. And tell us, moving away from the bad and into the good, tell us what your hopes are for 2021. Obviously, you're looking for good weather, but are there any new vineyards coming on? Anything that's exciting to tell us about the tasting room? I know that our viewers are going to want to hear about your tasting room in Glen Ellen. Certainly, it's a must stop for us anytime we're in California.
Well, we have no changes to the tasting room other than being forced to do things outside because of COVID.
Right.
And that's been an interesting little change. But we've learned to deal with it. You adapt or die.
Yeah.
And I'd rather adapt.
Yeah.
We do have cheers.
Here's to adapting and not dying.
We do have one new vineyard on Sonoma Mountain called Gus's Vineyard, and it's up the mountain from our house, maybe 7 or 8 minutes drive. It's really, really close to home, and it's the highest of all of our vineyards in elevation, and it's in an area that was considered sacred by the Indians. And there's an adjacent vineyard that has a sweat lodge on it, and there are regular pilgrimages made to that location because it's just a special place on Sonoma Mountain. And any time that you get that sort of recommendation, you have to go with it.
And it's named for a dog.
And it's named for a dog.
It's named for a dog.
But also the name of Talisman. I remember the story behind that. Wasn't that blessed by a shaman? The one that your mother gave you, or am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, my mother is Native American. I'm part Native American from the Chickahominy tribe, and she gave me a little object that was sort of the Indian equivalent of a St. Christopher medal for a Catholic, and it's supposed to protect the bearer. Only this thing is called a paho. It was made by a medicine man and then blessed by him, and then he told my mother to give it to me, and so she did. And it hung from the rear view mirror of my truck for many years, and slowly became faded and sort of ragged from the sun. And I eventually got a replacement for it because it was falling apart. But the original one ended up in my grandmother's casket when she died. So I thought that was an appropriate place for it.
Right.
Wow,
I see.
What a beautiful story.
Yeah.
I just love that.
And speaking of Sonoma Mountain, is that what we're looking at behind us there? Or isn't your home on Sonoma Mountain?
It is, and we're fairly low. Our driveway is about the 600-foot contour.
Right.
And you are looking back behind us upslope.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a lovely place to live. It's really special. And we feel really lucky to be here.
And one of our local historians has published a gorgeous coffee table book on Sonoma Mountain and all its magic and geology and all kinds of stuff. It's really cool.
It was put together by the Land Trust, I think.
Well, the Sonoma Mountain Preservation.
The Sonoma Mountain Preservation. And what they're trying to do is consolidate open spaces on Sonoma Mountain. And so as people die, if they would like to donate their property to the preservation folks, the idea is to create more and more public open space on Sonoma Mountain. And it's a pretty cool spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. We miss it terribly.
Yeah.
No.
Well, BC isn't so bad.
Yeah.
Oh, listen, we're very blessed, and also because BC, probably comparison to most other places in North America, we haven't been locked down. We've been limited, but it hasn't been too much of a hardship, other than we've had to cancel our trip to Sonoma last year. But you can be rest assured we will be down there as soon as we can get there.
That's for sure.
I miss you too.
That
So nice to hear.
That visit when we went to the Wildcat was such a remarkable
Epic.
day. The good news with COVID is we're probably not going to make you late or make you miss a flight this time.
Yeah, exactly. Do you remember that, Scott? You had to, and in fact, you did cancel it. You said, "Screw it, you're not going to go to Charlie Brown Airport," and I can't remember where you had to fly off to. But...
I had to go down to LA, and I think I went a day or two later.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
It was so much fun.
Sorry.
Yeah. By
Oh,
the
it
way,
was fun. Why ruin that?
yeah.
Well, something that you may not know, I remember bringing the 93, our first vintage, which was really fun to taste.
That's
A
something.
year ago, right now, we had a dinner of all the wines we made in the 90s. So 93 through 99.
We were supposed to be at that dinner.
Two of the wines we poured out of both 750 and 3 liter side by side.
Oh my goodness.
It was so much fun.
Oh, well, now tell me, was there much of a difference when? So 3 liter is Jeroboam, I think, or no? It's bigger
Some
than.
people call it a Jeroboam.
Yeah, I can never keep track of what the names are. Numbers are easier for me.
Yeah. A double magnum.
Yeah. So
16 glasses of wine.
Yeah.
did you notice a difference coming from the larger?
There is a difference, and my experience has been consistent for forever. The larger bottles always age more gracefully and more slowly than the smaller bottles.
Right. Yeah.
Yes,
Everyone agreed those wines still had such beautiful structure. They had good acid, good tannin. They still had fruit. I mean, you could tell that they were in their secondary phase of life, but they were so enjoyable. In fact, I just opened up one of the 93s there was about half of it left. It had been Coravant for over a year because we had tasted it to plan the dinner menu.
Oh my goodness.
Space it lasted that long.
Listen, when you opened that 93 for us, and it was 2019, I was just blown away.
Yeah.
I was blown away. So I can only imagine if a larger format bottle was aging it even nicer. But I mean, as you said, you could tell it was an older wine, but everything was there, and it was so complex, and it was such a treat.
Well, and over the years of drinking your wines, one of the things that we've noticed is a signature of Talisman is its ageability. I mean, these are beautiful wines. We'll just show our viewers what we're drinking right now. This is and actually Scott and Marta are drinking the same. This is their 2010 Weir Vineyard Pinot Noir. And this is youthful still. There's a slight change in color at the rim, and it's got a little bit more complex over the years, but fresh as can be. Lots of power in this wine. And tell us, is there a signature you think to Talisman wines? Is there a thread that runs through each of them that viewers might want to know about that reflects your style?
Well, that's a really great question, and the answer is yes, but no. I don't want anybody to ever taste any of our wines and be able to say, "Oh yeah, Scott Rich made that wine." What I want them to do is taste the wine and say, "I recognize this. This is from the Weir Vineyard, or this is from Adastra, or this is from Wildcat." And in order for that to shine through with Pinot Noir particularly, the real challenge is to do as little as possible in the winery, because every little thing that we do in the winery shaves a little bit more character off of the wine. And each little step that you take shaves more and more and more until the wine doesn't become recognizable for the place that it came from. It becomes recognizable for the things that were done to it in the cellar. And so our real objective in the cellar is to do absolutely as little as possible.
Bill Weir loves, he works with 5 winemakers. He loves to get side by side all 5 versions of the Weir Vineyard Pinot.
Yeah.
And it's like 5 different chefs making ossobuco. You know it's ossobuco, but they each have their own little touches and flares, but it's basically, the same thing.
Yeah,
So
and
it's really
if
cool.
you've tasted enough of our wines, so you know that when you taste the Weir, you are going to find common threads with that vineyard in all of the wines, and that's true for all of our single vineyard wines. You'll always find those threads that are connected to the land as opposed to the cellar.
Right.
So this year we've been doing a vertical dinner every November from one vineyard, every vintage we've ever produced. And so for Wildcat, it was started with 2003. And then we taste all the wines blind. Usually it's 9 or 10 wines with the chef. And he tends to group them, maybe 3 wines per course. He purposely picks 3 wines that are very, very different from each other. You might think that he would do it the other way around, but in that way he creates a dish that's going to speak differently to each of those 3 wines. And it's just, people are just fascinated and taking bites and sips, and it's so much fun. Hopefully we'll be able to do those again.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, because, the lovely Amanda who runs your tasting room, she sent the calendar invite and I was like, we are there. And then COVID hit. It's like, okay, we're not there, but how do we get there next year?
Yeah.
And so we're also fingers crossed that can happen, because we said to her, we would fly down in a heartbeat.
Oh, yeah.
In a heartbeat to do that. So
I'm hoping that we can continue that again this year.
Well, and the next vineyard that was up is called Huckleberry's Vineyard, also named for a dog.
right here.
The first couple of vintages, 08 and 09, we made 22, 23, 24 cases. And so we're coveting those bottles so we can at least have them at the dinner.
Yeah, and the Huckleberry Vineyard is interesting because the property was purchased by a guy who is really detail oriented and has been successful at everything he's ever done. And when he and his wife bought the place, they started taking as many classes as they could to learn about viticulture and how to do things. And the first 2 or 3 years, I guess the first 3 years, we did things in a way where I could sort of help them learn along the way. And so I would pick a dozen vines in the vineyard that I would personally prune and do leaf removal on and everything else, and they would sort of emulate what I did. And after the 3rd year, we finally got to the point where they had taken all the classes. They'd been in a lot of other people's vineyards. They'd done all of the technical groups, and they were able to do what I was doing without any help from me. And it was time for me to just let them do it on their own.
Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you today was because when we met in 2019, we had asked you the question of why Pinot Noir. And I think your answer was something along the lines of, because I get bored easily, I like a challenge, and Pinot Noir really speaks to the vineyard and the sense of place. And but you did hint that one of the growers that you work with, and I'm not sure who it was exactly, was making some Nebbiolo, and that you might experiment or play around. Did that ever happen? Might that happen?
Well, yeah, that was Bill Weir from the Weir Vineyard. And we have now made Nebbiolo since 2013. 2017 we did not, because we just couldn't get it ripe. And getting it ripe enough is always a challenge to us. And Nebbiolo is, I think it's more difficult to grow than Pinot Noir is. It doesn't have clusters in the fruit zone like every other variety. The first 2 buds on the shoots are blind, so you don't get your clusters on those first 2 buds like normal. They are scattered everywhere throughout the canopy. And so your canopy management has to be a little bit different. It ripens really, really late, so that's different as well. And what we've done with the Nebbiolo from Weir is we basically hang it out there until we don't feel like we can take any more risks. And then we pick it. If we're threatened by rain or it's going to freeze or whatever, then it's time to pick the Nebbiolo. And the Nebbiolo is very, very good. I think it is about as good as any California version that I've ever tasted. But it's just like Pinot Noir in California and Burgundy. It's not the same as going to Piedmont and having Nebbiolo from there. It's a little bit different. And if you want the genuine article, you really have to go to Italy. But our Nebbiolo is very, very nice, and it's got the same rose petal, sour cherry sort of thing. But it's it reflects where it's from.
But it does have that bracing tartness and tannin that Nebbiolo perfunctorily has.
Yeah, and it's the weirdest variety in the world after you pick it and you crush it, because the pigments are there's a lot of yellow pigments in it, and so the juice itself is kind of yellowish orangish. It's not even red or pink like when we first crushed Pinot Noir. It's yellow. It's weird.
Well, and the clusters are like this big as opposed to the Pinots, which are this big.
No, they're this big. They're
Right.
bigger than you.
and they're almost translucent. They're almost like gray.
Yeah, you
green.
look at it and wonder how on earth you can make good wine with it.
But it's fun.
Tell us, because I know that our viewers are going to want to know, because those people within California that can move around, they can come up to Glen Ellen and the tasting room's open.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you handle that one.
One of the COVID has had a whole bunch of terrible things happen, but there's also been a lot of silver linings, which people love to talk about, which is fun. When it first started, we were so thrilled to realize that wine is considered essential.
We'll drink to that.
Yep, definitely. Certainly helped us.
Mhm.
Yeah, cheers.
So even though we couldn't host any guests, people could call up or come by or order online and come and pick up curbside. We could still ship. We were just in the middle of a club shipment. We weren't able to have our pickup party, but I could go around and deliver them all in the Bay Area.
Perfect.
And since my travels to New York and Boston and our other markets all got canceled, I was like driving around the Bay Area twice a week. It was so much fun to go see people at their home because everyone was home.
But safely see them.
Safely, yeah. I would like drop the box, ring the doorbell, run way back and wave. But I could leave little gifties or it was just fun to check in, and people wanted to talk.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And it was funny for me to see how because I'm continuing to make deliveries, but how it evolved from they would just wave from a window to then pretty much we'd talk like through a screen door, and then they'd step outside even though we were 20, 30 feet apart. And then people started saying, well, can you stay for a glass of wine in the backyard?
I'm still driving.
Yeah. 20 deliveries, 20 glasses. That's a
Not
joy.
a bad idea.
And some of the wineries started right away offering delivery as well, but it was a minimum 6 bottles. It was only in the North Bay. And so our customers started asking me like, well, Marta, is there a limit? Is there a minimum? And I said, yeah, it has to be an entire bottle. I am not going to deliver glasses of wine.
So, tell us. So if people, obviously they're going to listen to this and they think, God, I got to do this. So what is the website address?
Our website is www.talismanwine.com.
Talismanwine.com. Great.
Yeah, and one of the things I was going to say, going back to your silver linings, is we have been fortunate enough to be able to travel around BC earlier in the year, not anymore right now, but one of the things that winemakers and wineries and people were telling us is that they've really appreciated the fact that a lot of them aren't going to go back to just sort of the open tasting room. You guys, I think, are appointment only anyway, because you're small production and you have a very dedicated group of members. But a lot of the wineries that were typically having, you could come in and taste for a fee, they much prefer the booking of an appointment because the people that actually really want to taste the wine are coming. It's a much better customer experience. They can explain more about the wines, and they've really enjoyed that aspect. And so many of them said, we are not going to go back to without an appointment. Like it just is the way to do it. And that's how we met Amanda and first got to know you guys. Was we were recommended to come down, and you had to book an appointment and sit there and go through the wines. And when you learn the story behind the wine, and when you can actually have the time to sit there one-on-one, it is a completely different experience than just rocking up to a counter.
Exactly. And all of our tastings are hosted personally, and we sort of see what direction the guests want to go. Amanda loves to do blind tasting with, oh, well, she likes this one, he likes that one, tell me what you think of this and that and that. And it ends up being a whole experience, which is what people are looking for more now. I don't know about, we don't have a tasting bar. We never wanted one. So I don't know how that's been affected.
Yeah, it creates a different sort of vibe if you've got a tasting bar.
Yeah.
I think that part of it is that, people have become interested in where their food comes from, and how it's farmed and everything else. And I don't think that wine is much different than that.
No, agreed.
One of the other silver linings, I think, is that people have been having dinners at home with their families and cooking.
Yes.
And having wine. And then they're more, it's different than having it at a restaurant.
Yeah. One of the things I want to say about your tasting room, because I think it's one of the great tasting experiences in the world of wine. It's in that beautiful, it's like being in your living room is what it's like. You've got that beautiful slab of oak tree table, and then you've got the gorgeous, comfortable chairs off in the corner. And then, of course, your tasting room manager, Amanda Lauren, who's been there, I don't know,
9 years.
9 years, yeah.
Since we opened the tasting room, she's been there.
And she is a special person. She just makes you feel so good. And it's always it's such a relaxing and inviting place to go and taste. Wineries and wine tasting rooms, not yours, but others, can have an awful lot of pretense about them. And that can be a bit intimidating to people. And your tasting room is the opposite of that. It is the most welcoming place to go and taste. You instantly feel comfortable there. It's like, hey, my living room, come on in, sit down.
You hit the nail on the head, because when we built the place out, that's exactly what we wanted. We wanted to feel like you were coming into our living room. And I've always been a little put off by the pretentious part of the wine world, because it doesn't need to be that way. Wine is no different than any other beverage or any other food. You just need to be brave enough to put it in your mouth and say, I like this or I don't.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't need to be more complicated than that. If you've got further interest, you can make it more complicated than that, and you can make it really interesting if you want to go down some other rabbit holes. But it's not necessary. It's about the enjoyment of something that you're having with a meal or having with friends as an aperitif or something.
Well, incidentally, there's a few pieces of furniture and rugs that did come out of our living room.
Well, they're fabulous. Yeah. It really does feel, it's gotten to the point where when we first started visiting Sonoma, before we discovered you guys, we would stay at different, VRBOs, and it would be like something near the square, or different parts. And then ever since we literally got hooked on Talisman, we're like, let's stay in Glen Ellen. Then we can just walk there. So we always stay in Glen Ellen now, because we know that we're 100% going to stop at your tasting room. So it's become what we do.
Well, another feature of the Talisman tasting room that is, just really speaks to your wines and you as people is, it's that the art is primarily photos of the vineyard owners and managers where you get your grapes from, and it's your family that's up on the walls, and a lot of them with their dogs too. I noticed.
Yes. Yeah. We've actually got two different sort of art things going on at any one time, and the first one is what we refer to as the growers wall, and it is portraits of all of our growers and vineyard managers, because they're really the stars here. It's not me. All I'm trying to do is try not to screw up their very difficult efforts. Yeah. And that's my big responsibility, is not to mess up what they've done perfectly. And then the other art is what you'll see on other places, other walls in the tasting room. And I've always been interested in art. I've always enjoyed it. And one of the things that occurred to me before we finished building the place out was that local artists are not particularly good at marketing themselves or their art. And it's very difficult for them to find a place to display their art because there are a lot more artists than there are galleries. And in some cases, that's probably a good thing. In other cases, not so much. And so what we decided to do is help local artists by doing rotating art displays at the tasting room. And so we're trying to do it on about a 6-month rotation where we will bring in art from a different local artist every 6 months. And that way we've got fresh new stuff in the tasting room all the time. And they've got a venue for displaying their craft. And we're not really interested in making a profit on this. We're happy to benefit from this beautiful artwork. And so even with our payments to the artists, they get the vast majority. Unlike a gallery, they get the vast majority of the compensation for their arts. And all we do is we take enough out of it to cover the insurance, because of course we want to insure their artwork, and cover credit card fees when people buy the art, and the artist gets the rest of it.
I want to mention something about the grower portraits, though. We found this fabulous photographer, and his name is Jack, and
he does a lot of stuff for National Geographic.
Yeah.
Oh,
wow. Incredible.
Oh.
He's had a few trips where he goes and photographs snow leopards, which is evidently really hard to do.
Yeah, and oddly enough, the Snow Leopard Conservancy is in Sonoma.
That is odd.
Yeah.
No, wouldn't have sawn that connection.
No, you would have thought like Tibet or somewhere where a snow leopard might actually be. Yeah,
exactly. But so when he said, yeah, let's do this, what are you looking for? And Scott said, well, I want you to go to each of these vineyards and photograph these growers and capture the essence of their personality and their passion in the photo, kind of like Annie Leibovitz. And Jack goes, oh, no pressure there.
Yeah, exactly.
But one of the things that I think people should also know is that you hold back your wines. And so your current vintage is the 16, I think. Mm-hmm. And can you tell us a little bit about that vintage and what people should expect for the wines they're buying now?
Well, say 16s are I'm going to let you describe them.
Well,
I'm biased.
It's 12. Consider that 12. We have to go back a little bit. There's always a background. 12, 13, 14, and 15 were all drought years and getting worse and worse and worse with every year. And so the 15s ended up being very small crops, very small berries, very intense wines, and they need a lot of time to come around. And then along comes 16, we get rain all winter, and the wines are just lively. They've got all the depth and all the structure, but they're so easy drinking and fun, and the texture is really sensual, and they have long finishes. When we release a vintage, we always sit down and taste all wines, might be 15 different wines, different Pinots, with our staff, with some local winemakers, local club members, and we pour all of them. And everyone writes down their notes. We talk about what to release earlier or later and what they taste like. And there's usually 12 people, 14 people. With the 15s, we actually had to go and have pizza and let the wines open up and then come back and taste them.
Oh, wow.
And the 16s are sort of the polar opposite of that.
They were immediately like aromatic and wonderful on your tongue and nice long finish. And we're having fun with them. And as they kind of evolve through the year, they're fun. And then sometime this year, we'll start to release our 17s, which is our 25th harvest.
Oh,
wow.
Congratulations.
That's fantastic.
Wow. Good for you guys. Holy Dinah.
Yeah, well, if I use the dog analogy with the 2016s, it's an overly friendly golden retriever.
We get that. That's amazing. No, and it was interesting because there's one vineyard where it's only 3 barrels, and we got the note from Amanda, and we want to buy a couple bottles, and because we can't get them shipped up, you have this locker program, and I just want to mention that for anybody who's watching, because
yeah, tell us about that.
So this is what was happening, is not necessarily they can't cross the border thing, but people want to get a couple bottles of these small production, or we also do some other tiny production wines that may be just one clone or one block or 100% whole cluster or something. We've got several wines each vintage that are really tiny. In this case, it was the Red Dog Vineyard that had to be mostly ripped out in the spring of 15. So the 15, 16, 17, 18 are really, really small productions. So she's doling out to top club members and favorite people, little allocation, but it doesn't make any sense to ship 2 bottles. So we started this locker program. We'll just hold on to it for you. And then when you get up to a case, we'll ship it, or you can come pick it up or whatever. And that way you have a collection started. Like a shopping cart online. You just kind of keep a few things in there.
and there's no cost. And there's no cost. You're just hanging on to them. So I just thought that's really original, because I have seen where wineries will hold on for a certain amount of time, but it's almost like there's a cost associated to the storage, which is fair enough. But
I talked to one winery who said that if people don't come pick up their wine in like 90 days, they donate it to charity.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I was like shocked.
Wow.
I'm a registered charity as of right now.
So back to the tasting room being open. And so we struggled because we were closed for a long time. And then we could open just outside. Luckily, we were able to get a permit to serve outside. And then we were shut down again at the beginning of December. And we just basically opened up 2 weeks ago. Thankfully, it's really nice weather.
Yeah.
It's a little too nice, actually.
Yeah, we need actually. Wow. But so it's been really fun to host people outside. Now they can come in, and we've set it up like a little wine shop. So people can wander in and buy and leave. But now we can finally host people and pour tastings for them.
Oh, great.
And we partnered with a local hotel too in Glen Ellen, where when their guests book a room, they send them a confirmation that says, by the way, you could have a special private tasting with Talisman if you'd like. And we go to the hotel property. I just did one yesterday and sit with the people, and it's as if they're at the tasting room, but they're outside at this hotel.
Oh, cool.
That's
What a
brilliant.
Yeah. So we've been having fun coming up with fun ideas, for virtual tastings and for more customer interaction and calling people. And it's been really fun.
Yeah, it forced us into a reset and allowed us time to really evaluate how we do business, because most businesses put together a business plan and then they get going so fast that they never have the time to reflect on where they've been and how they got to where they are, and this sort of forced us to reflect on those things and figure out how we're going to continue to go forward with a different set of circumstances. So in some ways, I thought that is, at least as far as the evolution of the business, was a very good thing.
Wow, good for you guys. I mean, that's great to hear such a positive take on, these circumstances. And it's a great lesson for me and for everybody, just to do what we can in these circumstances to make our lives better. Because it's possible. You guys are doing it, and I think that's great.
It's been really fun too. The people are, even when the pandemic started, we had people call up and say, I know that I want to support you. Send me a case of wine. I want to buy a case of wine or whatever. And also we need more wine to drink at home in lockdown. Yeah. But even now, people are coming up because a lot of the Bay Area is just needing to get out. They want to go wine tasting. Yeah. They're so polite. They're very gracious. They leave large tips. It's just been so nice to see how people are appreciating the effort that our staff puts out.
That's great.
Yeah,
that is really, really warming to hear. Well, and because we know you guys well, and we know Amanda well, no one's more deserving of that kind of warmth than you guys, and that's what you guys give off, which is great. By the way, and one of the things I think that we need to sort of close on is some sort of a tasting note about this 2010 Weir, because I just think this is such a spectacular wine. This has got it all for me. The first thing that really strikes me is the intensity of the flavors. I mean, this is it's just got so much flavor. And here we are 11 years past the vintage, and yet this intensity hasn't died down one bit. It's probably a bit more complex now than when it was first released. I'm getting some of those, and Marta, you mentioned it earlier, some of the secondary notes now are coming through. And it is just a absolutely beautiful wine and in a great place right now. And how
it took some time to open up in the glass.
Yeah, and you touched on this a little bit earlier when you mentioned that we release our wines later than most people. And first of all, it starts with our barrel aging program, and we're generally in barrel for 18 to 20 months or so, 21 months in some cases, which in the Pinot world is on the long side. But we also give everything a very, very minimum of a year in bottle before we even contemplate whether or not to release it. Rosés are a little bit different, but our red wines are that way. And it really started when I got a little fed up going to restaurants and feeling like I was committing infanticide because the wines on their wine list were only 2 years old.
Yeah.
And I like something that is a little bit more going on. I've always liked the analogy of comparing wines to people, and I've never had a really great conversation with a 2-year-old.
Definitely, that's fantastic. Oh my gosh.
We thought maybe we should taste a 16 alongside the 10 Weir.
I know.
Yeah, tell us what you're
Also fun. I noticed you've got the old bottle and the new bottle behind you too, but we changed our label.
Oh, let's have a look.
With the
Right.
12 vintage, and then also a lot of information on the backs too about the vineyard, about the elevation and barrel aging and whatnot. So that's kind of fun. We got rid of the foil. We ditched the foil.
All right. Okay. So there is we shouldn't worry if there's a cork exposed. It doesn't need a cap or foil or anything like that on it.
It needs absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and these two.
And it sort of goes with our minimalist approach to winemaking. We want to do as little as possible. We also want our footprint to be as small as possible.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the things that has driven me nuts in our modern world is getting a small object like this, but having it come in packaging like that. And
Sure.
I just don't see the need to waste a bunch of resources on packaging things.
Yeah. Tell us about the 16. Have you poured some? Have you tried it yet?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we've been sipping on it.
Yeah, we've been sipping on it. Yeah, we've had one glass of 2010 and one glass of 2016.
Well, it's not like you have a flight later, so you're fine.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And the 2016 is lovely right now. It's got that sort of rose petal thing going on the nose and some red plums, and it's really, really lovely.
Well, and it sounds like it's a very approachable vintage, just from your earlier comments. Not like the 15. This is, I think you said it's the Golden Lab. That's got too much energy. Probably jumps up on you, maybe licks your face.
It's super friendly.
Yeah.
That's the one. I'll probably have wine all over me by the time we finish this conversation.
Wait, it's still going to age quite a long time. It still has, 25% whole cluster and 20 some odd months 19 months in French oak. I mean, it's still going to go the long haul, but just right now, it's just lively and fun.
Is whole cluster, is that a anomaly, or is that sort of the norm with Talisman Pinots?
Well, for Talisman, we have always done a minimum of 25% whole cluster in absolutely everything. Right. In some of them, we've done much higher percentages, and we do at least 1 or 2 lots every year that are 100% whole cluster. And the longer that I do the 100% whole cluster bottlings, the more I like them. And we seem to be doing more and more and more of them. They take a little longer to come around, so we hold those bottlings typically a little bit longer. but they have structure that makes them very, very ageable, and frankly, they have more interest to them, at least from my perspective. You see some spicy notes and some structural components that you don't normally see with smaller percentages.
We call it method ancien, ancient method.
Yeah, if it's 100%.
Right,
And then
yeah.
you can picture Lucille Ball, stomping.
I want to know where the velvet couch comes in, where you're lying on it and he's feeding you.
Massaging your feet.
Yeah, massaging your feet. This I got to get Chris on this program.
Yeah,
So.
exactly.
Exactly. Well, you guys have a lot to catch up on when you do come down here.
Well, as soon as it's responsible to do so, we will be coming down.
Yes.
But before then, I want to take advantage of your Store It For Us program. What do you call that?
It's the locker program.
Locker
and
program.
I may have already bought a couple of bottles. So
Oh, well,
we started it.
Well, we're going to buy some more
By
then.
the way, Chris.
So, do we go to talismanwines.com talismanwine.com to find out about that?
We haven't put anything up on the website. You can call somebody, or if someone orders a couple of bottles, when you go on our website shopping cart, you can actually put a note in there and be like, can you just hold on to this for me? I won't be able to pick it up, or I want to wait to ship. But yeah, we will put something up on the website. That's a good idea.
Excellent. Well, glad I thought of that. Well, I think it's a great idea. Yeah, I'm definitely going to do that. And I'm glad to know that you've already done that. That's awesome.
I have, and it was for the Red Dog because there was only 3 barrels, and so that was the hook. Amanda's good at what she does. It's like, it's not like we need any convincing. You need to explain that to her. Like, we're already unabashed fans and we are completely biased.
Yeah.
But, it was.
And that wine, that's the 2016 Red Dog. That was the last of the 16s we're just releasing now on pre-sale. When I was putting together everybody's notes, because when we do those tastings with everybody blind, we feed them, and then the price of admission is we get to keep the notes. So I sit down with 12 or 14 people's tasting notes. And then, of course, I have to taste it again. And it about put me into orbit. That wine is exquisite. It is ethereal. And it's like, you're going to love it.
I've just got to interrupt you for 1 second. There's a bunch of animals moving up in your field behind you. What
turkeys?
Oh, those turkeys.
Oh, those are turkeys.
Yeah.
Those are wild turkeys, and we will shortly get the deer coming in. And you may see a cat or two in the background who are curious about the other animals.
We just saw a cat.
I thought it was a snow leopard. We have noticed every time we've stayed in Sonoma, you will hear the turkey, the gobble gobble in the background.
Oh, yeah.
Well, guys, listen, this has been absolutely terrific to reconnect with you. For us, it's just been marvelous. And I know it's going to be absolutely great for our viewers.
Thank you so much. Cheers to you both.
Cheers to you, Scott. Cheers
And
to
well-being.
Looking so well. And we look forward to when we can do this in person.